What is up everyone, Movie Wayne back again with another top 10 video, and today is going to be the top 10 movies that terrified me. Yes, this is a bit of a personal list today because I'm going to be talking about all the movies that at some point in my life terrified me. So some of the movies on this list aren't all that scary nowadays, but at the moment in time I watched these for the first time, might have had a different effect on me than it did to you. So some of you might think I'm a bit of a wimp here for some of these certain films, and some of them as well are some like psychological films that have mentally scarred me. So not exactly, making me jump out my wits, but ones that have stuck with me for a while. There's a couple on there, I will explain when I get to them. Now, there is no real order in this list apart from 1 and 2, but I could have mixed these round anywhere in the list really. I mean, number 8 could have been number 10, but let's just get into it, guys. No honourable mentions here today. Let's just get in to number 10. Number 10 is going to be The Haunting from 1963. Now, I know I said the order of this list doesn't really matter too much, but I thought I'd put this in at number 10, the first movie on this list, because it was the first horror movie I ever seen in my life. And it was sort of by accident, really. I was about 5 years old. It was the first house, me and my mum and dad ever lived in. And my dad just had this movie on the TV, this black and white movie. And I think he fell asleep or something on the couch. And I was just sitting there, just watching this film, knowing that I probably shouldn't have, been watching it. And there was loud bangs in this house that these 4 people were in, and it was starting to get to me. And then there was a flashback scene from the people who used to live in this house, and that terrified the life out of me. I remember running out the room, but I kept peeking behind the door to watch this movie because I wanted to see it, but I couldn't sit there sort of on my own with my dad, just not watching it with me. And I just couldn't. It terrified me for weeks, I remember. And I actually bought the Blu-ray about 2 years ago now, and I watched it immediately just to see if it had the same effect as it did on me back in the day, and it didn't. It's an okay movie, but the scare factor just isn't there. There's a scene towards the end that did make me jump a little bit, but that was about it. There was nothing really, terrifying about it. I remember just thinking, was he really scared of this? But I was a kid back in the day, so there you go. But number 10 is The Haunting. Number 9 is going to be Jaws. Now, this is a movie that more psychologically scarred me. Mentally, I could not put myself into the sea for years after this. And I don't think I was the only one. I think this made a lot of people not wanting to go to the seaside for a long time. And today, I'm still a bit wary of the sea. I don't like what's down there. And the fact that you're above the water and you don't know what's underneath you freaks me out a little bit. But every time, I go on a boat trip on holiday or something, I still think of this movie. I still think, what if the sharks in this water? And this movie just didn't help me at all. And I remember just saying I didn't want to go in the sea, when I was a kid because of the movie Jaws. And my mum and dad used to say, the sharks are just deep in the ocean. They're way far out. They're not going to come by the shore. But I remember the movie Jaws, and that kid just gets wiped out by Jaws about 20 minutes into the movie. So mum and dad, that's bullshit. So number 9 is Jaws. Number 8 is going to be Friday the 13th. Yes, I know this is not a very scary movie at all, but this is one of the very first horror movies that I ever watched. Now, my next door neighbour, Vicky, at the time when I was about 7 or 8 years old, she had 2 horror movies on VHS, and one of them was Troll 2, which is another video in itself, and the other one was Friday the 13th. Now, I used to say to her, can we watch it, and we put it on one day, and I just couldn't get through this movie. I had to keep telling her to pause the film. It really freaked me out. I had to keep going outside for breathers and stuff, and then come back to it about half an hour later, because I thought the killer was just going to enter the living room we were sitting in for some weird reason. It just freaked me out. I'd never seen anything like it before. And this is one of the very first horror movies I ever, was introduced to, along with something else which I'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, it just, I didn't like the first person perspective and stuff. I thought that made it creepier. The yeah, that scared me. That every 2 minutes where the killer's stalking his victims. And I think it's Kevin Bacon in this movie gets the spear through his neck. So I couldn't lie back in bed for weeks, just years even. And it was a really terrifying movie at the time for me. I remember I got like 4 or 5 times watching this with her, and I could never get to the end. And one day I actually got to the end because I was getting used to it, and I just wasn't prepared for that scene at the end in the canoe with Jason jumping out the water. The biggest jump scare I think I've ever had in a movie. That's really got to me. It really made me jump out my skin. I couldn't believe it. And I don't think Vicky told me that it was going to happen. I think she was enjoying, watching me be scared to death there. But yeah, Mum, I used to go to Vicky's next door and watch Friday the 13th. I do apologise for that. But number 8 is going to be Friday the 13th. Number 7 is going to be A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddys Revenge. Now, this is a similar little story to the last one I just told, but this was my friend Jamie's house. He's my best friend to this day, and he used to have A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 on VHS. Freddy 2, we used to call it, but I remembered struggling to get through this one as well. I mean, I was a bit of a wimp as a kid, but this probably isn't the best Nightmare on Elm Street to start with. I mean, number 3 was my real big introduction for the series, but I used to go to his house and watch snippets of this, but again, I just couldn't get through the whole film. And this was after hearing kids in my school talk about this Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and my mum and dad would not let me watch it. I think my dad weren't too bothered, but my mum just was having none of it. I was really young at the time, so I used to sneak over to my friend Jamie's house and watch this, and it was a scary movie, it still is the scariest Nightmare on Elm Street movie, I feel. Freddy's at his darkest here. There's not really much comedic, one-liners coming out of this movie. It's just him focusing on killing and taking over Jesse's body, and Jesse's really scared in this movie, which adds to more effect. Mark Patton done a great job in this film, and there's scenes like the school bus scene at the start. That's a really creepy scene, I feel, where they're just, the bus driver turned into Freddy, and there's no way out of this bus because they're on the edge of this cliff. And basically, they're just going to get killed by him, and that's the end of it. And there's another scene where Jesse keeps going down to the basement, and, he's looking through the window in the middle of the night. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's seeing, like, the shadow of Freddy walk past the window and stuff. Things like that creep me out about the film, and I wouldn't go down and get a glass of water for months on end in the middle of the night. I didn't want to go to the toilet in the middle of the night because of this movie. It really did, play on my mind, and just made me not want to get out of bed when it was dark, put it that way. So yeah, it's still a little bit of a scary film. We've had scarier films since, but this one to me will always remain the scariest Elm Street, I feel. So number 7 is A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. Number 6 is going to be The Shining. It was Stanley Kubrick's visuals that really made me scared of this film. It's the elevator with the blood coming out of it, and you got them 2 weird little child sisters just on screen, and then it pops up on screen again and it's been murdered with an axe and stuff. Yeah, it just didn't really sit well with me. And who can forget room 237, where Jack is just walking in there because his son Danny has said that this woman hurt him and there's not meant to be anyone else in the hotel, and Jack walks in and there's a woman in there. And obviously she turns into something else really quickly, and you just don't expect it. It's horrible to watch. It's just scary, and I remember first seeing that going, oh my god, I have to get out the room. But there's other things about this. The score is really unsettling at times, that dum 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 dum, and another thing about this, I watched this for the first time on my own in a dark room, and when something scary happens and then the screen will go black and just say Tuesday, I was like, oh my god, bring the light back in right now, I need the light. It was just freaking me out. And the movie towards the end just gets even freakier, with that guy dressed as the bear and stuff. It's just a weird film, but like I said, it is the visuals in this. Even the scene at the start, and he's not even a bad guy in this, where Halloran, you just say, telepathically talks to Danny and says, how'd you like some ice cream, Doc? Even that, creeps me out. So number 6 is going to be The Shining. Number 5 is going to be Candyman. Now, I think this movie did actually terrify a generation in the 90s, but this basically, my first introduction to this was my dad had started letting me watch horror movies, and he bought me a Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 VHS, and that's where my love of horror grew, you know. And every Friday, he used to let me rent a horror movie from the video shop, and he was going on his own one day, and I said, just pick me any, you know, and one that you think's good. And he came back with Candyman, and he said, yeah, son, there's your movie for tonight. It's a good film, I've seen it, you'll like it if you're getting into your horror. And I was like, oh, never heard of this one. So yeah, I just threw it on, and I was watching it on my own in my room, and half an hour in, I was like, this is a good story, you know. Really, really into this. The first scene sort of creeped me out a little bit, but there was this scene where this kid is telling Helen about this Candyman character, and he's talking about this kid who said the name in the mirror 5 times, and he eventually goes into this toilet, and it's flashing back at this kid walking, you know, the camera panning into this toilet, and you can hear the kid screaming in agony. There's blood everywhere, and this portaloo opens, honestly, and this kid is just lying in the biggest pool of blood you have ever seen, screaming. And for some reason, that image just scared the hell out of me. I ran down the stairs. I was just like, what the hell have you got me from the video shop here? And my dad must have thought, are you joking? But it really scared me, you know. I think being introduced into horror a little bit earlier might help you with these movies, because I just wasn't mentally prepared for that, you know. I think if I have a child one day, I'll probably just slowly introduce him, you know, to more like children's horror, and then slowly get him there. I mean, my dad just threw me in the deep end there, thanks Dad. But it's Tony Todd's character as well. He's a really creepy character in this. Does the voice is so haunting and sinister, and the rest of the movie is really creepy too. So yeah, I had to put this list with Candyman in. I could not include that movie, and that's the second time I've told this story on the channel now, so if you've seen it the first time, I do apologise. But number 5 is Candyman. Number 4 is going to be Insidious. Now, I'd heard a lot of talk about this movie before I'd seen it, you know, everyone was talking about it. I didn't go to cinemas to see this or anything like that, but I remember seeing the adverts on TV of them people terrified in the cinema, you know, where it's got the night vision mode on and stuff. I think this was one of the first, you know, TV trailers to ever do that, and they don't really do it no more. But I wanted to see this movie because I'd heard how terrifying it was, and you know, I fully expected it. I thought it can't be as scary as everyone's going on, but it really, really was. And from the moment we start the movie with the camera panning around the house, and then that really, really creepy music comes on, it's like the violin sort of music, you know, playing a really strong chord there, to the title saying Insidious, and I thought, oh my god, I'm in for a really scary time here. And there's some really, really effective jump scares in this movie. I'm not really a massive fan when a movie just goes for jump scares, but these are done really, really well. And admittedly, the first half of the movie is scarier than the second, but it's got a great build up, you know, towards that second half. And there's some really scary scenes here with the demon face, you know, that just appears on screen. And there's other moments with the kid dancing in the living room and stuff. That was really, really creepy. And the fact that you can see him before this happens, you know, hawk eyes will only catch that, but it's well talked about now that you see this kid while she's walking through the house. It's a creepy film, it really is. And one of the most modern ones that, you know, really got to me. So number 4 is Insidious. Number 3 is going to be Sinister. Now, this was probably the last movie that ever really scared me, to be honest. I don't know if it came out before Insidious or after, but I watched it quite late on after it had been released, because I remember seeing it was getting like 2 stars out of 5 and stuff, and I just thought, oh, it's going to be another one of them horror movies that's just crap. You know, because at the time, they were getting horror movies every 2 minutes, and they just weren't great at all, you know. But I was really surprised by this, and basically it's about Ethan Hawke. You know, he moves into this house and he finds all these tapes from the previous families who've lived there, and it's just, the tapes consist of this guy stalking the families, and he's just watching them, you know, play in the front garden and having fun, and then the camera will cut and he's basically murdering them, and they are snuff movies, basically. And it just didn't sit well with me. It was really, really creepy to watch, and every time Ethan Hawke put one of these tapes in, I'd just be like, oh, really, do we have to see this again? And the rest of the movie is really creepy too. It sort of goes into the, beyond realism, even though it was really, really realistic at the start, but it's still a great movie to watch, and one that really did surprise me and terrify me, actually. And so number 3 is Sinister. Number 2 is going to be Final Destination. Yes, I know this isn't a very scary film, but this is more like Jaws, where it's played on my mind, and it has done for 20 years. I was just getting over my fear of flying, and I watched this movie, and I don't think I'll ever be over it because of this film. It's just, I don't like watching the first 15 minutes of this film. It's just horrifying to me. It's terrible. It could happen in real life, I suppose. I mean, it's very, very rare, but when you see the inside of this plane crashing, it's just horrific to watch. It's horrible. I don't like it. And the fact that he gets off and it blows up anyway, just doesn't sit right with me. It's the build up to this scene as well, where they're getting on the plane and he's seeing the, the 666 signs, and the music in the toilet where the guy who sang that song died in a plane crash, and the music, the score, it's just haunting. It really is. I don't like that scene whatsoever. Now, I could have put this in a top 10 movie scenes if I wanted, but it's actually the whole film, because there's moments an hour into the movie where they refer to the crash and you're seeing the news footage on the TV, and I just don't like this universe where this crash happened. It's, every time they go back to the crash, it just puts hairs on the back of my neck. It really does. So yeah, it's a scary movie for me. It really is. Not for everyone, but for me, this really, really did scar me. So number 2 is Final Destination. Number 1 is going to be the Blair Witch Project. Yes, I know there's people who've seen this movie the last couple of years for the first time, and they don't find it scary, and that's understandable. There's been a lot of found footage since 1998 or whatever it was that when this movie came out, but at this time, I did not expect this. I hadn't seen anything like this before. I know movies like Cannibal Holocaust and stuff were made, but this seemed real to me, and there was talk that it was real because these were just amateur filmmakers making this movie. And that night I watched this with my mum and dad was one of the most terrifying nights of my life, if not the most terrifying, because it was just absolutely horrific to sift through and hard to watch. I was scared to death, and I don't even think my mum and dad expected it, to be this bad. I mean, they were letting me watch horror movies at the time, but I think if they knew, they would have pre-warned me. We just got it from the video shop and watched it, and it was so hard to watch. I went to bed that night, I was sweating all night, I couldn't get to sleep for about 3 hours. It was really, it was terrible. It really was, and the fact that you don't really see anything in this film, it's the fact that they're waking up in the middle of the night, lost in the woods, and people are leaving rocks outside the tent and stuff. That just doesn't sit right with me. And there's, them Blair Witch symbols just hanging above the tent and stuff. That to me is terrifying, because they're lost in these woods, they're going around in circles, but there's someone else there watching them. It just creeped me the hell out, and that end scene is another terrifying moment in the movie. So, number 1 for me, guys, of the movies that scared me more than anything is the Blair Witch Project. Okay guys, I hope you all enjoyed this video. What movies terrified you the most? If you want to leave it in the comments down below, I will reply to every single one of you, I promise. Have you got a top 10, most terrifying movie list? Leave it down below, or top 5 even. If you want to subscribe, it's up to yourself. I've got a lot more videos coming, lots more top 10s. Take it all easy, guys. And I'll see you all in the next video.